Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. Are you ready? This is your host, Laura Aisha. Let's do this. Well, here we go. It's Ignite Intimacy. I'm your host, Miss Laura Aisha, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here with a goddess powerhouse, as I would call her. Just a brilliant, fascinating, dynamic, gorgeous woman in every sense of the word, as far as I can tell. Dr. SaraNasserzadeh is with us on the line. How are you, Sara?
That is very sweet. After all of those compliments, great. Thank you.
So it's so wonderful to be here with you. Sara works all over the world. She is traveling a lot. She's got a lot of clientele. So Sara, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us on the line tonight.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah. So Dr. Nasserzadeh and I met at an Esther Perel event in New York City in November. And it was amazing. And it was all about the masculinity paradox.
Yes.
Which I think we're all curious about. And that just encompasses the modern man and the way that men have been just, trained on how to be men and the emotional, psychological, in order to be a man, you must X, Y, Z. So it was really fascinating. And Sara was one of the speakers there. And when she got on stage, I was just like, okay, hold up. Who is this woman? Like, I need to talk to this woman. She is so dynamic and so brilliant.
Thank you.
So Sara and I are going to dive into a bunch of different topics tonight. We'll kind of just ride the wave from dating. I know you have a book coming out about dating, right?
Yes.
Great. So we're going to do a deep dive into dating and just why are people so confused and disappointed about dating, language in text messages, and how easily things can get misconstrued, and people don't know if you're flirting with them or if you're just being nice or if you're being mean or so all the fun of dating in the digital world. We'll also dip into, it's fascinating that you work globally, Sara, with this work. So really, unpacking what it's like for you working within different countries and cultures. And then also we'll just talk about sex and being orgasmic and pleasure. So how's that sound?
Sounds like we are going to solve the whole problem in the world by the end of our conversation.
We very well may, So Sara, I would love for you to share a little bit with our audience about who you are in the world.
I would like to think of myself as a very, very privileged woman, because I feel like what I do is has so many different layers, and so many different people around the world let me into their hearts, their homes, their relationships, their communities, their most vulnerable areas that they wouldn't ever share with anybody, really. So in that way, I would be one of the most privileged people in the whole entire world. And so clinically speaking, I work with couples and relationships, anything to do with relationships. And then that's how I actually got to dating, because I initially worked with couples, but then I realized that if I want to see better coupledom in the world, I better go to the dating area. And I love it when people come to me for premarital counseling. And I call it premarital, but, before they want to commit to a long-term relationship. Because I feel like when you set them up with good habits and better patterns, and also shed some light on their blind spots, then everybody is capable. Everybody in this whole world is capable. And I truly believe that everybody deserves to have the relationship that they desire. It's just a matter of nobody teaches us how, and that's so complicated. So yeah, clinically I do that. And then I obviously specialize in psychosexual therapy. So anything with sexuality, with having better sex, having sex at all, having painless sex, all of that, those categories, and really thriving in that space of people's lives. So that's one area that, this is my clinical focus. And I teach a lot of colleagues. And as a part of that, you've been there, I talked about masculinity around the world, how they're experienced and expressed by different people around the world, and what it means for us living in North America right now. And especially after the era of Me Too and Time's Up, all of that great campaign and movements. Hopefully movements, if we can really sustain them well, they're more than campaign. They will be one of those amazing movements that started by women, but is going to be enlightening for the rest of the humanity as well. So that's that. I do a lot of policy work. I'm a senior advisor to the UN. So I do a lot of policy work with governments, with different people of member of states and politicians who have a lot of influence in this world. And I love it because I feel like if you can be effective in the work that you do with them, and also as well as the executive work that I do, I feel like, when you change the minds and life of an executive person or a politician, it really does trickle down and affects the lives of thousands of people. I love to have that influence and be impactful in that regard. And I teach quite a lot, colleagues as well as, different universities. So these are the main chunk of my time that during the week that, I put to the world, and I get energy back from it.
Amazing. And are you a mom as well?
I am.
Ah, nice. That's incredible. So, okay, talk to us about, you've got this unique viewpoint, right? Because you actually work globally. And
yes.
So what are you seeing in the world, whether it's similarities or differences in terms of dating and sexual expression or sexual satisfaction?
Well, that's a good question. I could go to that whole conversation that we're all human, we're all the same, but we're kind of not, because sexual satisfaction and sexual self, so to speak, if we start there, it's socioculturally constructed more than anything else. Physiologically, we could argue that, yes, if we know how to stimulate ourselves, maybe pleasure can look the same. But then even then, the expression of pleasure will be very different because the language that we put into it, there's actually research that two of our colleagues done, a very good piece of research that looked at the words that people use for orgasm, for example. Or they're very different from around the world. And a person who is looking to shoot something out of their body versus somebody who is going to gain something, who is literally gain, like the word gain is used, or the person who is going to explode, the person who is going to, you can't really compare those experiences with each other because the language that we use to express our experiences also feed back to the meaning of that experience.
I know, sorry to interrupt you, but
Sure.
I know in French, they call it le petit mort.
Yeah, le petit mort. Yeah.
So it's like the little death.
Yes.
And that's so fascinating. I never even thought about this, that the terminology, the language for it is different, and that the language really creates what the experience is for an individual, for a couple within that culture.
Yeah, it's very true. And within the French culture, you also need to look at the language, because sometimes also when we have the translation within languages, and again, one of my privileges is to speak, several languages. And I think it really helps to go deeper than the surface of what that language offers. So for example, when you talk about the little death, is whatever that you give up to get there, whatever that you have to let go of to experience that death. What is it that you're going to leave behind? all of those are experienced in that one single word, right? Or phrase rather here. And then the other thing is the first experience I ever had with this kind of terminology. You know, my first degree is in linguistics and I'm obsessed with languages.
Ah, that's amazing.
Yeah, if I wasn't going to be a relationship expert or sexologist, I was going to be a linguist because I think language is the least effective way that we communicate with each other. Yet this is all we have sometimes, right? So how to make it more effective and just to get through a communication without creating misconceptions and building up on our assumptions. It's a huge deal. It's a huge art to be able to do that. The first time that I faced this in the area of relationship, consulting was when I had my show for the BBC. In 2006, I started it. This was the first show in the Middle East.
What was it called?
It was called The Whispers. The reason I called it The Whispers, again, linguistically, language-wise, I wanted to prove to people that this is something that everybody talks about, but we just whisper. This is the whisper that we're familiar with, but God forbid if we want to talk about it out loud. So, and I just wanted to capture that irony in it, in the name. And then when I started the show, I was very much aware that I wanted to be very respectful, but also I wanted to talk about everything. I was not going to shield the information about masturbation, homosexuality, things that people could not even imagine that, they could be talking about this out loud. And imagine that this was about 12 years ago. Nobody else has done anything like it.
In the Middle East, nonetheless.
In Middle East and North Africa, right?
Wow.
So I went on exploring the words. One thing early on that I really wanted to do was to give it a name in whatever language that I went on TV or, show with, because I felt like if orgasm is something that Westerners do and we call it orgasm, then this is not something for me to be expressed or to be experienced for that matter. So I worked very closely with the Academy of Languages inside Iran, for example, when I started it in Farsi, that I wanted that specific word that was in Farsi that people can use to name their experience. So these were the things that we went through a lot of cultural revolution and evolution through this program. And then later on, 12 years down the line, it's such a common language for people, orgasm, masturbation, foreplay, all of that people don't even question where they came from.
I know. It's so great. I love it because this has actually come up a lot recently. And up until I was 30, I don't think I was even remotely comfortable saying the word masturbation or talking about it.
Right.
It was just not something I talked about with my girlfriends. It was not something it just didn't happen, and I've been self-pleasuring since the single digits. Like, I don't know when I started, but I was certainly young. And so now I'm just finding that everyone's talking about masturbation. Everyone's talking about porn. Everyone's and so much of this stuff is it's just more widely discussed that I don't have this cringing sense of shame around it anymore.
Yeah, because also socially you were accepted, with this terminology. But let me tell you something. People think that masturbation is linked to sex, and that's what makes it really awkward and weird for us to talk about. But if you go deeper than that, anything that gives a human pleasure, even out loud laughter, even good food, even good wine, whatever that gives a person a pleasure in almost every language that I speak, actually all of them, and every country that I worked with, within those countries, which is up to date, 38 countries, there is indulgence in pleasure is synonymous with something bad happening to you later. So you're going to pay for it. So if you put it that way, anything, any self-stimulation, any pleasure, any kind of pleasure that you experience, you're going to pay for it later.
That is
and
so
that is
interesting.
the root of the problem, apart from religion, apart from any of the doctrines that, we were brought up with. But
well, do you know, can you give us some insight into the root of that belief system of
pleasure,
of doom, of you've experienced like that pleasure is somehow sinful or bad, or you're going to have to pay for it?
Mm-hmm. Well, different types of pleasure have different origins of them being kind of a malignancy, if you like, in your life. So, for example, you will hear even in the common language that don't laugh too hard. You're gonna cry tomorrow. There is some saying, in most cultures around that. One of the things is anything that gets a person out of their body, out of their mind, out of their control should be treated badly, because then if you go back to the history of humanity, we were all in one way or the other from collectivist perspective, right? All of us, regardless of where we ended up with individualistic versus collective way of thinking right now, right? So if I indulge in just my pleasure and my way of being, then I'm going to not pay attention to my neighbor or to the community who I'm supposed to serve. Right? So that's essentially where it's coming from, that if you are self-indulgent, then you are going to chip away from your communal responsibility. And that is the base of it. And then different religions came and taught people about self-discipline, self-preservation, and also specific to masturbation. Some religions believe that you're not going to spill the seed, you're not going to waste your semen and sperm. This is for men. And by the way, in most of the religions and most of the talking around sex and sin, mostly we're talking about men, not women, throughout the history and throughout all the historical book as well as the religious books that you read. For women, it's mostly about being faithful and being committed to a man and raise the children well and being a productive part of the community. But for men, because they have this sperm, it's known that, you have to keep it to yourself and you have to give it to a worthy partner to serve the bigger purpose of the community. So these are the themes that if you go around the world, you will see that these are very, very common. Of course, we have communities that, practice with multiple husbands and multiple wives. And, we have different preferences, but those are rare, really.
Fascinating. Well, and so I can see so clearly how this whole linguistic piece and cultural piece, right? Because we're living in a colorful world, right? Like it's a rainbow of everything everywhere, right? There's you're on in one subway car in Manhattan, you could be on the subway car with, people from 30 different countries and languages. And so let's tie this into the dating space.
That. For the dating, let me tell you something. I'm sorry, but I tell my clients, I say, the moment that you enter the door of my offices, your relationship is mine. Okay, so I'm going to fight with you. I'm going to fight for you. We're going to make this happen, because I truly believe that the root of so many problems in the world is that people do not have that secure and source of secure love in their lives. That's what I truly believe in. Okay. And I don't care how traditional that comes across. I'm not asking people to marry at the age of 15 and have multiple kids by the age of whatever. But what I'm asking is there needs to be one person in your life that gives you purpose, and also you are the purpose of their lives, for their lives, to do good in this world. And we all know multiple research shows from various disciplines that if you feel loved by at least one person in this world, you will do much better by other people, rather than if you just live alone and you feel unloved and unlovable. And so that fact established. Okay. And there are really good books out there for people to read. But one of the things that is happening in the dating sphere right now, especially in the Western Europe and Northern America, is that we go through the process of dating, the websites and profiles and whatnot. But most of my time is spent tweaking and writing the dating profile of my clients, because I feel like, after a while when I get to know them, And then I ask them to bring their laptops or whatnot, show me the profile or the printout of the profile they put forward. That has nothing in common with the person that I know in the room. So, and that bugs me, because just with a little bit of this morning, I had a gentleman that I'm coaching for the dating, and he just told me that just by changing 2 words in that dating profile to have a better reflection of himself, he is attracting many, many different people.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it's like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But then you see, on the other hand, it really pains me to see that this can be done. I'm not saying that this is a piece of cake, but this can be done. People can be done. It's just a matter of, we can't just go through the process without the appropriate content. So people go on a date and then they go with a 35 list of questions or whatnot. And then they come back and like, okay, so what are these questions even? What did you gain?
Yeah. And we all have checklists, right? Like, like, are you into this or into that? Like, and I know for myself, like, I will just kill someone off really quickly if, for something ridiculous. And what I'm learning is that, okay, give people a chance. Like, okay, so there's something that they did or didn't do, or some way that they are or that they're not. Give them a chance, right? This is like a whole human being. So do you find that your clients kind of come in with like, well, he's got to be this or she's got to be that, or,
Yeah, but you see, I have to tell you, I see them both sides, right? So one is you give people too much chance, that you should have never done that. The other one is the people that you should have given chance and you didn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So many of my clients come and say that, well, but da, 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 da. And then I have a phrase for that. Well, there's a song for that, actually. The first time I heard Celine Dion singing it, like, when the wrong one loves you, right?
Yeah.
There is no such a thing. If there's a wrong person, then there's a wrong person. Move on.
Yeah.
So this is what is bothering me, that, and the other thing that I hear a lot is that, but I have to trust my gut. Without getting too nerdy here, gut means your limbic system. Okay, literally is something that you're comfortable with, you grew up with. Okay, if that gut is not polished, it is not to be trusted. Okay, show me your polished gut and then go and live the rest of your life according to that gut. I have no problem with it. But most of my clients, their gut is cluttered.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that if we haven't created what we want, we have to try something different.
Yes.
And so if you're relying on an unpolished gut as you're, speaking to it, which I love, then you're just doing what you've always done, which has gotten you what you've always had.
Yes, exactly. And also remember, we change too. Because like whatever relationship that was very satisfying to me in my 20s might not be in the 30s, might not be in the 40s, 50s, 60s. This afternoon, I had a wonderful lady in her 80s. The relationships that she's looking for right now is very different than somebody who I coached this morning, for example, in their 30s. So these are the ones that, we need to be very realistic. And the other thing is, something that was really interesting to me when I first moved to the US was, I'm from Iran, right? So with the mentality that if you have a really good Persian rug, you keep it well, and then you try to really sustain it very well, and you pass it on to the next generations. Okay, so that's an asset. And then I went to England. In Britain, we have a saying, we say, I'm not rich enough to buy cheap stuff. So that's another mentality that, you go after something that that is going to serve you for a long time. And I know that I'm making it commercial, but then I think that's a language that we use a lot in this country. And then when I went to New York the first time, I went to my friend's house. And then I said, well, we were talking about Persian rugs and, all of these things. And then she said, well, I don't get it. You spend all of this money on this rug, but I really prefer to go to Target and get like a $20 rug. But then I would like to change it every couple of months. I couldn't get it and she couldn't get me. And that actually made me think that, wow, this is actually way more than the rug.
Mm-hmm.
This is the mentality that, when you have something, what does that thing mean to you? Where is your root? What is it that you're trying to achieve here when you are looking for a partner? Is it for the next 10 years of your life? Is it to raise your children with and then you move on to another partner? What is it? And many people don't have these conversations with themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, because it's like, I know for me, I've been trained. My parents are together 53 years, and but like, it wasn't always nice, right? Like, and I was raised with this idea that one partner, lifelong partner. Mm-hmm. And then there was this other thing going on inside of me that was like, but what if I want multiple partners? And am I meant for one man? And maybe I'm meant to have 3 partners throughout my life, or, you know what I mean? So I love what you're pointing to here. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. That's actually, I'm glad you brought that on, because I feel like, the moment as I started to talk about having intentional relationships, having, shaping, I always say that, arrange your own marriage, arrange your own life by design. Mm-hmm. We talk about that. But then, it's really interesting because sometimes I feel like people hear these words and they feel like, oh, we don't want to go back to, like whatever, like prehistorical dates. We don't want to kind of bond with only one person. And that's absolutely okay. As long as you're clear, as long as you know what expectations you have. Like I ask my couples, the ones that are married, I ask them to bring their marriage certificate to the sessions. And then they read the front part, which is, a few words. And then I ask them to flip it over. Usually in most cultures, the back part is white. And then I ask them to fill that part up, because we all have expectations and intentions when we go to a relationship. And if we don't know, if we don't want to admit them, then that's where we get into trouble. So I think, if you know that, one person is not that for me, and I'm going to be monogamous or polyamorous or even polygamous, which is not allowed in this country, but in some countries it is, allowed. Mm-hmm. So whatever that you want to be, even without the label, we don't even need to label, but it's really helpful that because when you are in front of somebody, that conversation about exclusivity will happen. You don't just take it for granted.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So who else is in this mix? Mm-hmm. And are you okay with it or not?
Well, and also like, who else is in this mix within one person? How many voices are speaking? Who wants to be heard here? And whose needs within that one person, right? Mm-hmm. So like the one person may have 4 or 5 different desires and needs within a relationship. So I'm curious about the languaging within text messages. Mm-hmm. And just the language that we use. I have a particular thing I want to point to that came up on a date that I recently had with someone that I actually really like. But let's go into that, just how confusing the world of texting and dating can be.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of a conversation, for me, language, using words, is the least effective way of communication, right? So when we text message each other, first of all, texting itself has different meanings. For some people it's more formal, for some people is informal, for some people is they are texting as they are walking and you miss the whole context of that shaped that text. Mm-hmm. So texting should have etiquette around it, for me at least. You need to clarify where I'm running and texting you, so that you actually read that text with that expectation that Sara is actually running and doing this text, So, and that happens, we learn as we acquire technology. My father always had a very good saying, growing up. He always said, before you acquire any technology, make sure you have the cultural capacity for it. And I'm so grateful for that. Because whatever that we acquire, the games, the texting, the anything, are we culturally fluent in that language? Mm-hmm. So that's really important. And also cross-culturally speaking, if you are dating somebody whose English is not their first language, or maybe they use emojis, And by the way, we have actually emojis for vulvas and penises and all of those as well, if you're interested.
Nice.
So
you'll have to let us know where we can find those.
And also Bitmojis, many things that are out there that, we might be using them or not. But I think it's very important that when you go out on a date with somebody, just tell them as a follow-up to this, I don't do well with text. Please call me if you want to. Or if you want to quickly access me, please text me. So these are the ones that, these are the conversations that we need to have.
Yeah. Well, and also just how things can get so quickly misconstrued via text message. And I have someone very near and dear to me who has just started to date this man. He doesn't speak very good English. She doesn't speak very well in his language. And he had texted her, and this is someone who's fairly new to the country, and he's alone during the holidays, and he's missing his home country, and, et cetera, et cetera. And so he texted her, and he said something like, so when are you going to cook dinner for me? Something like that, right? And man, she laid into him. Like, what do you mean? I don't even want to cook, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, and I was like, but what if he was just, like, what if that was his way of saying, like, I want connection with you. Like,
yes.
I want to know you more. I want to be in your home and with you in the kitchen. And you know what I mean? So like, and I said that, and I said, well, do you think maybe he's just hungry for community and connection and thought that would be you know what I mean? But it's like so easily we can get triggered.
That is very true, especially if you are a person from a culture that eating and sharing food with each other brings you closer to one another. It's a romantic act, versus in a country where women less and less spend time cooking because they feel like this is not a woman's job. So it could go actually two very different sides of the spectrum, right? So I agree with you that, sometimes clarifying questions, cooking for you. How do you mean? Or I would just pick up the phone and call them. If something happens, your text really rubbed me the wrong way. Let's talk.
Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Something like just the clarifying, because life is all about assumptions. Because if you leave your body alone, that's what we are built up to do. We assume because we need to protect ourselves against the enemy. We assume that's what we do. And then if we add the intellectual and human and societal part of it, we need to really get clarification around stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
if something doesn't sit well.
Yeah, well, there's so much protection going on in dating, right? And I know I watch myself do it. I watch my friends do it. And I'm curious about something that this man said to me recently. And this is like someone that I actually am like really interested in, this man. And that doesn't happen like very often, where it's just like, we're both interested in each other and it's cool and it feels good. And he's in New York, and I just left New York, and I'm going to be traveling and, exploring warmer places for the winter, And so he said something to me like, well, I just want you to know that I'm an out of sight, out of mind kind of guy, or something along those lines. And then I was thinking about it, and I realized I really don't know what he means by that, because he could mean 1,000 different things. And then I was curious, is he just trying to protect himself because he likes me and he knows I'm leaving and that I'm going to be traveling? And is that just like his way to put some sort of a barrier or a buffer between us? I'm curious what you would say to something like that.
Well, I would actually say that it depends. Sometimes, depending on that gut that we talked about, right? All of us have defaults. So if he tells me something like that, I will interpret it very differently than yourself or the person next to you, right? Depending on that default that we come in with, depending on our securities, insecurities, life experiences, all of that. And the first reaction I have is, I would actually say that, so you want more of me? So that's my first reaction. But then maybe your first reaction is, okay, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt. You're more insightful and you're saying that, okay, so maybe he needs a space, maybe he wants to protect himself. But that's a very defensive thing to say, right? That out of sight, out of mind. And yeah, that would be my first thing, because what is it that he's trying to communicate? So do you want more of me? So do you feel like I'm ignoring you by leaving and not seeing you? So what is that? What is that interpretation? And if you do enough of your own self work on yourself, you will know as how you interpret different signals that people send your way. Right? And then you will be able to control yourself and don't jump into your default interpretation.
Yeah, well, because the default is the old abandonment story. Like, yes. I'm going to be forgotten again.
Yes.
And then the child kicks in. And she's like, no, I don't want to be forgotten. I want you to remember me, like, and I want you to be here when I come back,
Yeah. And did I not make enough impression?
Yeah, exactly.
To last. Yeah. So these are the things that I feel like, and to begin with such a relationship, a long distance relationship, I wonder if there was a conversation around this, that we're living in, different places, and in a few months' time, I'm going to do this and that and the other and travel. So those are the things that I feel. Or maybe another person might say that, okay, so I enjoyed you, you enjoyed me. So when I come back, we'll just reconnect and see, we'll take it from there if we are available.
Yep. Okay.
That would be one way. But there are a zillion ways, right?
Exactly.
That we can go about it.
Yeah, exactly. You could interpret it in 1,000 different ways. So, okay, I know you have a client coming up. Do we have a couple of more minutes?
Sure.
Okay, great. So,
and thank you for being mindful.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm curious, you had mentioned that there are a couple of simple exercises that you could share with our audience around dating and like to do the work themselves.
Yeah. Well, here's what I suggest. For people who are experiencing the dating, first of all, they need to really look through the patterns of dating. Who is it that they're attracting? Who is it that they're attracted to? And most often, I find that people have conflict, internal conflict. So they're looking for somebody that they're impressed by, but then they're looking for somebody who is calm and anchoring and loving and all that. So these are the conflicts that I see in people. And I think it will be a very good idea if people can sit down with themselves in a very honest way and just jot down what is it that they bring to a relationship, what is it that they're looking for in a person, not immediately, but in 3 years, like 5 years, 10 years, whatever that they have in mind, that the shape of relationship that they want. That's one. The other one is I'm going to share some 5 ingredients. I call them 5 ingredients for a reason, and I'll tell you why. So I studied 312 couples for the past 10 years across the world. And these are the couples that by subjective reporting, as well as me observing their relationship very closely, they are in thriving relationships. And the way that it works is that in thriving relationships, it's not me, you, and us. It's me and you, and the relationship will emerge. And that's a very different conversation to have. I mean, we can't just, brush over it. That's my whole book, right? The next one. But the 5 ingredients that people need to look for if they are looking for a loving partner, the loving partner that can the love that can reduce your heart pressure, that can mend your wounds, that sort of love, okay? The long-lasting, sustainable love. Because also we know that there are different types of love and people follow different types of love. This is the love that I'm promoting, right? So that one, you need to have a shared vision with the person for yourself and for the relationship. You need to have, if physical attraction and physical intimacy is important to you, you need to have some sort of physical attraction and physical connection with the person. That is actually on the bottom of the list. You will be surprised. But for these couples, at least that I studied. And then the other one will be compatibility, but not only based on interests or whatnot, values. Compatibility based on values, based on sociocultural context. This could be social class, this could be family upbringing, conflict resolution styles, many different varieties of compatibility. And then the other one will be compassion / empathy. And they're two different things, obviously. So a person could be very empathetic, but not being able to be compassionate, and vice versa. So this is also another thing. So these 5 ingredients, they need to be there if you're going to give anybody a chance. And then when they are there, when the foundation is there, then based on that intentionality, the love and the loving relationship is going to emerge. We are not going to take it for granted that 2 people come together and the relationship is there. That's the mentality that got us here. So we need to really, this is the new perspective that I'm bringing, that I know that this is very alien to many people who grew up with this kind of mentality. But I always say that let's give your heart a break rather than give you another heartbreak.
I love that. And in wrapping up here, any just closing thoughts on just, being orgasmic in your life?
Okay, I have a good one for that one, because don't come to me and say that I don't have orgasms because I'm not dangling from chandeliers. That's not what orgasms are about, okay? We have a whole book on that, Orgasm Answer Guide. If you're interested, go read it. And my co-authors are amazing, so you get really good scientific data on that. Start by changing the language. If we are going to achieve orgasm, have orgasm, give orgasm, we're not going anywhere. But if you're going to experience orgasms, experience pleasure with each other, that's a good start.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so how can people find you online, Sara?
I have a website and I'm doing a better job by putting blogs. So hopefully there are more readings for people to do and reflect, and definitely get in touch. It's under my name, www.Sara-Nasserzadeh.com. And I'm very active on Facebook and Instagram, very much so. So under my name, just, if they search me, I'm there, and I post daily of my whereabouts, wherever in the world that I travel, whatever social observation that I have, they're all there.
Amazing.
So,
and are you at Sara Nasserzadeh on Twitter and did you say Instagram?
Yes, my Twitter account is a little funny because Dr. Sara is a common name.
Okay.
So it's at Dr.Sara_. So that's my Twitter. And my Instagram is just Dr.SaraNasserzadeh.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
And is doctor spelled out or just DR?
A DR.
Perfect. Okay, so it's Sara Nasserzadeh, and just so everyone knows the correct spelling, it's Sara, Sara, and then Dr. Sara's last name is Nasserzadeh, N as in Nancy, Asserzadeh. So all of those links will be in the show notes. And then I know you're an author, so you mentioned the Orgasm Guide.
Yes, Orgasm Answer Guide. It's a book that we published with Johns Hopkins University Press, and it has about 80 plus question and answer only on orgasm. Dr. Beverly Whipple was with us writing the book, who was the person behind the G-Spot. Dr. Barry Komisarok and at Rutgers University, long-lasting research on orgasm. And also, God bless his soul, he passed away, Carlos Florence Bayer. That was the Scientist of the Year, actually, a few years ago. So that was one of our books. And I have another book for people who are interested specifically in global perspectives around sexuality education. It's called Wheel of Context for Sexuality Education. And yeah, there are multiple things that I wrote and publications. On my website, there's a list of my publications. And if anybody is interested from the public or the colleagues who might be hearing your podcast, I will be happy to be in touch and send them resources. And just don't be disappointed if you don't hear from me right away, because I'm all around the world, as you can imagine. But I will get to all of my emails myself personally.
Wow. Dr. Nasserzadeh, you are just a delight. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your brilliance. You are such a powerful force in this world. And thank you for being here with us.
That's very kind of you to have me, Lauren.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And Ignite Intimacy, you heard it here. Please check out Dr. Sara Nasserzadeh online. We'll have all the links in the show notes. We love you. Thank you so much for being here with us. And until the next time, stay blessed and ciao for now. Thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out at igniteintimacy.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review and a rating. It helps more people know about us. We love to hear from you. You can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions to hello@igniteintimacy.com. And tell your friends. Music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey. And this podcast is produced by yours truly, Laura Aisha. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.